What's up, guys, and happy Monday. Let's talk this out-driving alibi and how that translates inside a courtroom. How will Ann Taylor create doubt and Kohberger use alibi as a potential defense legal strategy? I've got all the details for you, so let's jump right into it. Let's recap the alibi defense. It's Kohberger's constitutional right to not offer an alibi. But in Idaho, if he plans to raise an alibi defense at trial, then he must provide details of the alibi in advance to the state. In his response, Ann Taylor stated, quote, he was out driving alone, and the corroboration of Mr. Kohberger not being at 1122 King may be brought about by cross-examination of state witnesses and our own expert witnesses. Since the focus of the alibi defense is location, not witness, let's now circle back and break down the Elantra and cell facets of this case. In the PCA, SV1 commences travel at 2:44 a.m. en route to Moscow, and then is spotted on multiple cameras through and up to 4:04 a.m. when it is seen making multiple passes and turns right in front of the King Road home. But the PCA never states SV1 actually parks. At 4:20, SV1 is seen departing the area at a high rate of speed. As a footnote, the actual FBI Elantra report that identifies SV1 as Kohberger's vehicle will be heavily challenged by Ann Taylor at trial. Was that even Bryan's car? We will address this again in this segment. Second critical element to location is those cell phone pings. Kohberger's cell pinged in the area of the King Road home at least 12 occasions prior to the murders. Quote, all of these occasions, except for one, occurred in the late evening and early morning hours of their respective days. So this corroborates the defense objection, which states he often went out late at night for drives, but does not conclusively prove his destination was the King Road home. Was he in the area to meet a friend, lover, or perhaps even a connection? Let's not forget to note Kohberger's phone was turned off or in airplane mode from 2:47 to 4:48 a.m. So let's translate that PCA verbiage from the Elantra and cell reports over to the courtroom and to this out-driving alibi. From the entire window of time, 2:44 to 4:20 a.m., will Ann Taylor argue that Kohberger was taking a drive alone at night as he normally would to an area he normally would, but he never entered the King Road home? Or will Kohberger's geotagging prove he took an entirely different route and that his vehicle was improperly identified by the FBI in their report? So let's now migrate over to the state's critical timeline and evaluate that dimension of this case. There is no current direct evidence to prove Kohberger was inside that King Road home that night from 4:08 to 4:18 a.m. It's all circumstantial. The sheath DNA, the latent footprint, and the location-critical Elantra and cell data reports. So to compare the ratio of time viewed from a judicial lens, the defense has a whopping 96 minutes window of time to create doubt versus the state's razor-thin 8-minute window where they must prove to jurors Kohberger was inside that home committing those crimes. There's literally zero room for error for the state. Let's also now talk about the state's burden of proof. The state has a much heavier load to push to get past that conviction finish line. The defense does not have to prove innocence, just create reasonable doubt. And so was Bryan out driving? If there is any evidence that Kohberger was elsewhere, or that the murders occurred earlier, possibly 3 to 4 a.m., when Bryan was in fact out driving, is that a fatal blow to the state's case? My analysis of the out driving alibi, it is ambiguous yet specific enough to previous behavioral patterns to create doubt and stick in the minds of jurors. The state needs to present solid, direct, and compelling evidence that proves Bryan was inside that home. Dylan never actually identified Kohberger, and the defense will subpoena Bethany as a potential exculpatory witness. The Elantra data will be heavily challenged due to the change in years by FBI mid-investigation, and quote, precisely how the police came to believe the car was an Elantra is still unknown. So again, will the Elantra be exculpatory? And just to reiterate, as you recall, if no victim biomatter was found in Kohberger's car, how was he just in that home, alone, stabbing 4 humans fatally in less than 10 minutes? He would be drenched in blood, and his DNA should be all over that King Road home, not just on the snap of a sheath placed on the bed next to Maddie. And so how does this all consummate into a defense legal strategy? It is my belief Ann Taylor will let the state lay out their fatal error-filled case, then expose discrepancies specifically pursuant to the timeline and the Elantra identification process, as well as potential bombshell testimony from Bethany, and will repeatedly call into question Kohberger's role in the crime, if complicit, by cross-examining the state's witnesses and using her own experts to discredit the state's weak circumstantial-based case. The critical question left for jurors to answer, was Kohberger in the King Road home at the actual time of the murders or out driving? So let's talk about this. Do you think Bryan will raise the alibi defense at trial? Did Kohberger act alone? Does science suggest Bryan may be complicit in this crime, but not an actual killer? Will Ann Taylor say the murders occurred earlier in the 3 to 4 a.m. time frame and elicit testimony to corroborate that, i.e. were Dylan and Bethany texting earlier than 4 a.m.? Was Bryan an informant? Is Koberger guilty or innocent? Talk to me.